First and foremost, it's a pleasure to be here. I owe you a talk about how a VC actually looks at investing in longevity. Specifically, we're going to talk about the angle of how you build a longevity company and what to look for, what to look out for whenever you are putting together a startup, especially at an early stage. I think we're going to start today with a brief intro of what longevity means to us and who we are as LongeVC. And then we're going to, I think, smoothly segueing into how to build a company in this space and what are the variables we're looking at whenever we're investing. All right, so I'm going to share the screen with a deck, and just to make sure you will be able to see the deck, right? Is that correct?
We don't see it yet. Oh yeah.
Well, you see it now, I believe. So you see it now.
Yes.
Perfect, and you see me flipping the slides as well.
Indeed. Yes.
Okay, awesome. So look, let's get it going. Very informal. You can actually stop me if you have any questions about anything that you see here on the screen. I think this is meant to be a discussion first and foremost. So for the purposes of a very brief introduction, so I'm Sergey. I'm one of the managing partners and one of the founding partners, actually, of LongeVC 1, LongeVC 2, and then a bunch of other stuff that we have built throughout the years. We started as a group of business angels originally. One of the first groups that started to kind of systematically and pragmatically, quote unquote, invest in the longevity space. And then we decided to institutionalize. We built a bunch of companies of our own before that, but we decided to institutionalize as an investment group in 2021. And this is where LongeVC 1 was basically created, right? So that was the first venture capital vehicle of ours, which was created with one sole purpose that made us both, I think, famous and infamous in a way in the industry. We wanted to create a vehicle that was based solely on analytical and scientific excellence in order to pragmatically invest in what we have believed was and still is a longevity space and kind of the next longevity unicorns, right? And we're going to talk about that phenotype in a second. Now, that vehicle is already fully invested. We started in 2021, invested it fully into 20 companies in 3 years. It was the first fund of ours. We're now into our second vehicle, so this is launching literally within 1.5 months from now. It's going to have the first closing. Going to be a bigger fund, a 250 million fund, still with some mandate to invest in early stage companies. So we are very much still the guys to talk to whenever you build something or you end up creating a company in the framework of this event or any other. We'd be happy to talk. And then while building the fund stuff, we also created a bunch of other ecosystem solutions around ourselves. We do have a satellite fund, kind of a sister fund, a smaller one, which is called NIVC, that deals exclusively with animal health and animal aging, which is a huge industry in the United States specifically. And very underrepresented on the venture capital front, which is really interesting and surprising. We do have a nonprofit of our own, the Longevity Science Foundation. So this is the one which you tap into if you are a research group that doesn't have a company yet. So we are the ones that are essentially distributing non-dilutive funding, non-equity funding to early stage researchers in the longevity space. So if you are studying aging biology, but you're not ready for the company yet, this is the organization for you to talk to. And then we also co-founded the Healthy Longevity Medicine Society, which you might have heard of, might have not, but it is the largest society of longevity physicians as we speak, with its own certified protocols and kind of all the bells and whistles. So we've been quite busy in the space, but then really, when I say we, there's quite a crowd. So there are currently 4 managing partners in the fund. Gary, myself, Aurora, and Ilya. Aurora actually joined us in the second fund now, but Gary, myself, and Ilya, we were the co-founders of Fund 1. Been there since Fund 1. What we are specifically proud of, though, is our scientific advisory board, which I think is pretty unique for the space. You might see some familiar faces, chaired by Alex, the CEO and founder of Insilico. But also has some really interesting names, such as Mike Levitt, Nobel Prize winner in chemistry. Eva Bischoff, for example, I think one of the most well-known longevity physicians out there, Tom Rando, et cetera, et cetera. So we really built the fund around scientific excellence and the ability of critically look at what longevity is, what longevity is not, and how do you really tag along aging biology whenever we're talking about age-related diseases and kind of combating aging in general. Well, and finally, for the purposes of introduction again, I often get the question of why we started in biotech, because really investing in biotech is one of the most miserable things that you can do in terms of the return and the risk profile, right? So you need to be an absolute optimist to be doing that. But then we really believe that as a society, longevity and age-related diseases are the biggest issue that we face. Right, so in order to enjoy all the other things, really, and these things are whatever, crypto, fintech, you name it. Right, you need to figure out how not to die from something prematurely at the age of 50. Right, so we are kind of united around this goal, and I think that sector per se backs the most added value, and this is. Only this is already enough to be investing in it and to be building something in it, even though it's one of the most difficult ones to operate in. Now, let's define the field for a sec. Now, as a VC, what you will see in my narrative is that we kind of approach longevity from a very pragmatic standpoint. So we'll look at it as the space which is geared towards extending the healthy lifespan or health span, if you wish. So lifespan per se doesn't really mean anything. You don't want to extend the lifespan. You want to extend health span, and then the lifespan extension is almost a byproduct of you extending the health span, right? Seems kind of self-explanatory, but the field has suffered through a range of debates around that one. But now we kind of finally agree that you want to extend the healthy years, not the years per se. And then it's very much a convergence of different disciplines out there, right? So it's traditional biotech, it's less traditional biotech when it comes to regenerative medicine or kind of more longevity-focused approaches such as senescent cells and you name it. It's also AI, it's also quite a bit of engineering. So all of these work together to really extend health span of human beings or healthy performance, whatever you feel like is the best definition for you. Now, the field has also went through kind of, still going through really, a very interesting debate on, well, what are we actually treating, right? Are we treating aging as a holistic phenomena? So is it the holistic treatment of aging we're after? Or we are trying to break it down into actionable items. And by actionable items, I mean really age-related diseases. Now, it is very important to understand that for a venture capitalist, for an investor in the field, and really for the founder in the field, and you'll see why in a second, it is very important to break it down into actionable items, because only this allows you to really progress through stages of development, through your conversations with the regulator, and eventually prove your point that your technology, whatever that is, actually changes something in terms of the health span or in terms of the specific disease domain that you have picked, right? And this is why we have all this ambiguity around the quest towards a longevity drug and what a longevity drug is. Now, what I would like to offer you as a definition is that, whenever we talk about understanding aging and combating aging, it is, of course, easier to combat it disease by disease. And by understanding in the disease-modifying way, understanding the nature of age-related diseases, we also understand aging. Again, it pretty much is a byproduct of it. So a longevity drug per se is not a pill that you're going to consume and become younger, right? It is something that would have a disease-modifying effect across several age-related diseases in a wide patient population, right? So that's your ultimate goal. And essentially, if you hacked it, you can claim that this is your longevity drug 1.0. Now, as I've mentioned, VCs, we do not really invest in holistic life extension. And the reason for that is there is no endpoint. The investor, whenever you start building something in the space, you need to understand that the investor looks at it from the point of view of course, impacting patient lives and kind of moving the needle in terms of the standard of treatment, but also in terms of the entry point and the exit point. And that means that between the entry point and the exit point, there should be a set of milestones, and there should be a set of kind of value inflection events. And if you don't have an endpoint that you wanna target, then and this is very much the case with the holistic life extension as of now. In a clinical setting, you cannot measure it, and thus you cannot really defend it in front of the regulator. And as of now, you cannot kind of build a comprehensive biotech company around it. So we mostly invest in focused efforts, right? Where you can define an endpoint and you can essentially arrive at actionable insights. As a fund as well, we very much view our success as an investor through the lens of really two things. Our ability to evaluate science, especially the early science, because the early science has the largest question mark out there, which is translatability, right? So how do you translate something that you've shown in cells into animals? And would something that you've shown in the animals translate into humans, which is by far the largest Pandora box out there, right? And then proprietary deal flow. And proprietary deal flow, well, it's also you, right? It's our ability to talk with the founders early to understand how we become one of the first investors. How do we help that group of people that we have invested in to progress through milestones, to grow in value, to grow in clinical data, et cetera, et cetera. Now, finally, people very often confuse the logic of a VC being risk averse. In reality, it is the other way around. And this is something that I really want you to remember. As a fund, you do account for risk of investing in something that you have not vetted totally in terms of science, but really your opportunity cost of not investing into something that still has this component of, a variable that you cannot assess because it's early stage, that opportunity cost in most of the times outweighs the risk, because your risk is only, a write-off of X1, but your opportunity cost is sometimes 20x, 30x if you've missed something. So investors are afraid may be a strong word, but investors are also cautious of not investing in you, as interesting as it sounds, maybe even from me, right? So that is something for you to keep in mind, that you are also kind of something of an untapped value once you start building your company, and it is very much so something to capitalize on. And a tech-savvy investor would also understand and appreciate. Now, as you move and as you start building in the market of longevity, there is also something that I want you to realize, and that is that longevity market per se is not really limited to this very small sector of longevity interventions, right? It is actually a much broader field that includes all your usual suspects and all your usual age-related diseases, your cardiovascular, neurodegenerative, metabolic, etc. The trick with the longevity industry is that how do you take the aging biology that we have been studying for a while now, and we have started to be able to focus around certain disease areas, right? So how do you take that aging biology and how do you take all these new methods of, for example, AI for drug discovery that allows us to design molecules faster, and how do you tangle it into traditional biotech approaches that would essentially allow you to create this competitive edge and create this disease-modifying edge that old school biotech was not able to create in these diseases, right? So really, the longevity company is possible in any of these big markets, already established markets that are disease-driven, of course, right? It just depends on your take and how much aging biology is really involved. And I have a couple of cases for you in the very end, and you'll see that, you can be a longevity company, you can play in the very same markets that traditional pharma plays in. Now, the other thing that I really want you to remember is that once you start building the company in the space, you immediately become whatever it is. It can be a platform technology, it can be an AI for drug discovery play, it can be a diagnostic play, it can be a therapeutic, but big pharma basically feeds off acquiring the guys like you. So if you look at the cancer field, for example, what you will see is that only 14% of FIC, first-in-class oncology drugs, were actually developed in-house by pharma. Most of the IP portfolio that pharma has, it acquires from small biotechs like you. So that is something that you would be keeping in mind once you become a founder in the space. Well, simply because you need to stop. I think you need to demystify big pharma and kind of your potential industrial partners very early, and you don't need to romanticize that field that much, right? So you are very often much nimbler and in a way smarter than big corporates are in the space, and this is why you are, if you do everything right, you are an acquisition target kind of automatically. So for a VC, again, you invest in the field of longevity, focus on disease modifying, keeping the aging biology in mind. That's kind of your ultimate formula. Now, we finally moved into, well, how do you kind of attempt building the company in the space? And that is really just me kind of mumbling about things that we see very often founders do, and things that you should do or should not do really as an early stage founder once you start building in the space, again, whatever that is. Well, first and foremost, you're going to have a fork of choices, right? And you start with, well, picking your horizon of adoption, really. And that horizon of adoption is, are you building for something that is happening now? And I've simplified it here, but that kind of gives you I think the ballpark logic. Is it something that is happening now? So are we talking about something that consumers will most probably, or healthcare institutions will be using tomorrow, if it's ready tomorrow? Right. So, and that's your screening, that's your AI-aided diagnostics, nutraceuticals, wearables, aging clocks, whatever, right? So anything that works with your Fitbits, Garmin's, you name it. So that's one segment. Now, the other segment is your 5 to 10 years from market entry. And this is where you mostly find early stage therapeutics. Sometimes this is where you find drug discovery platforms as well, because in the modern day and age, in 2025, drug discovery platforms are the ones which are also required to have their own therapeutic pipeline, not only a business model of selling the service to pharma, because that has rendered to be obsolete, but really their own therapeutic pipeline. So are you working on a drug? Well, this is where you're 5-10 years to the market, and this is where you find yourself. And this is where your narrative changes, of course, as well, and your regulatory strategy, everything. Now, the last frontier is this 10+ year kind of breakthrough horizon. And this is where we're looking at these future longevity unicorns, very much so, but something that is very theoretical as of now. And that is systemic rejuvenation, that is cryonics, that is head transplants, which is very much a thing now, an emerging industry, by the way. I mean, not the industry, but kind of the movement, being able to glue together neurons and kind of, previously reversible damage of spinal cord, et cetera, et cetera. So something that is 10 kind of plus years away, but still very much there. So that might be your focus. But then again, it shifts your narrative pretty much so. Now, you're also bound to pick a category, one way or the other, where you find yourself in. Are you going for a therapeutic against an age-related disease? Are you going for something with a much broader rejuvenation potential? Well, that's very good, but then you will still need to find an age-related disease target for yourself, right? Where you will start your beachhead market, very much so, where you'll start proving your point in preclinical and clinical. Are you going for a diagnostic or a prevention solution? I think that is a more difficult field to play in, because in diagnostics you have less strategic partners that are ready to acquire you, really. But then again, if you're capable of solving an unmet need there, then you're very much welcome to do it. And then, of course, longevity infrastructure, which is AI for drug discovery, which is anything that democratizes longevity access. Virtual clinics also belong there, as well as longevity medicine. Longevity medicine has emerged to become a separate field. You're very welcome to build something there as well. Now, 4 points that I really want you to take from this quick talk here, once you start thinking about your business idea in the space, is first and foremost, you do sell your vision, very much so, right? But you kind of you emphasize, and by selling your vision, you're emphasizing your long-term potential. But then short-term focus is super important, especially in biotech, especially if you were talking about therapeutics or, let's say, drug discovery play. The reason for that is you really need to start somewhere. And even if you are a platform technology, which can go many ways in terms of different assets and different disease indications, you need to pick one, which would be the optimal one in terms of your speed to market, in terms of your regulatory, and minimizing expenses, of course. And this is how you prove yourself, right? Not a single investor would invest in something that can do 100 things, but is not really sure where to start, right? So emphasize your short-term focus in the same way as you're selling your long-term platform potential. For those of you that are building apps, please, if you are building a super app in the longevity space, and by super app, I mean something that does everything starting from, booking your an appointment in the gym, ending up with hooking your Fitbit to an app and whatever, and analyzing your biomarkers. Start with one feature. Kind of agree on one killer feature that would actually drive the first consumer adoption and minimize your churn of people, and validate it like this. Do not spend 1 year building a super app with 100 things that people do not need. We've seen there is a graveyard of those in the industry, so please don't do that. Don't be one of those stones in that super app graveyard in the longevity space, right? Spend time understanding your regulatory. And that is, even from the get-go, do not spend money on consultants, just Google it or ask ChatGPT or something, right? So do some research. It indicates that you are actually realistic of what it's going to take in terms of the time to actually get something to the market. And that also signals to your very early investors and very early accelerators, angels, whoever you will be talking with, that you have done your homework. Now, what's most important is companies that are prolonging rodent lives or making mice feel better and live longer, as well as teams that are excited about the biology of something. These are not companies, right? And that is extremely important to understand from the get-go. A company is basically a holistic structure that has the scientific components tied to a very specific market strategy, where every piece of data that you're generating essentially contributes towards your regulatory, to proving your efficacy in front of your very first industrial partners, validating strategic interest, whatever. But do not get overly fixated around the biology of something that you find exciting. I find these things exciting as well, but these companies are not really companies, right? So those that are focused on science only, typically don't make it because there is no BD component, and the BD component should be there from the day zero, really, right? So talk to market as early as possible. Try to validate your idea as early as possible, even if we're talking about big pharma. It is actually really easy to even ask someone, like ask me, message me on LinkedIn if you're not sure about a certain disease indication, or if you want to talk to someone from big pharma around a specific disease indication. I'll always be able to suggest the person to talk to, right? And I'll be happy to do so. But please don't build something in silence, and don't be overly excited about biology of something, and that's it, right? And then if you're building out of the university, specifically make sure the IP ownership is transparently secured. And that is, if you have built something in the university, chances are it belongs to the university. So make sure that there is a licensing agreement in place, because IP in biotech is pretty much one of the biggest checkpoints on the due diligence checklist. Now, when we're talking about the team, this is something that I've already mentioned, right? Science is equally important to business development. So we would be always looking for a well-diversified team, a well-rounded team, if you wish. I'm not talking about an army of people doing BD, but a solid BD person from the very beginning, working hand in hand with the science team, with the tech team, whatever you're building, that helps, right? And that indicates that you actually want to kind of open the window and look at the world outside early. In the early stages, you should also keep all the equity to active founders. So an investor, especially in biotech, because in biotech you assume long road to market, and you assume several investment rounds or bridge rounds in between, whatever. So no debt equity is allowed. All the equity should be with actually working individuals, right? Your fundraising there at the very beginning is 100% people dependent anyway. So the profiles and the roles in the team and how you behave and how you communicate to each other, even in a Zoom call with an investor, that's pretty much 99% of your success anyway. Do not be arrogant. Do not say that you're going to solve all the issues out there. Do not say that you're going to solve cancer, and if you don't want to join us, that's fine. We're going to find another investor or something like that. And I've seen these things happening. Just don't do that, you'll be just fine. Please do not engage in wishful thinking. And what I mean by that is, do not try to see something in your very early data. If you're building a therapeutic company, for example, that is not there. So be critical about things that you are generating. You can very much try to oversell, as every startup founder does. And I did it myself back in the days when I was building my companies. But see the border between communicating the vision through the very early data that you have and the very first kind of progress that you have, and wishful thinking, because wishful thinking is a huge red flag for everyone out there, right? Very quickly, I know we're maybe out of time a bit, but very quickly on your fundraising logic. So whenever you're building a tech consumer app, this is how you should really think, and I've simplified it tremendously, but you should really think about your fundraising timelines, right? So at pre-seed, you're trying to tackle your technical risk, and that is whether we can build it. At seed, that's your validation risk, and whether you will find the first adoption. Series A, well, you're trying to kind of tap into your go-to-market risk. Can you sell it to more people? Series B is very much scaling. And Series C, well, it's a good problem to have, right? So this is where you have all your corporate bells and whistles, and you try to understand how you exit and whatever. Now, in therapeutics, the things get a bit different. So in therapeutics, you're more R&D geared. And that is, you first raise for your POC stage, pre-seed in human language. And that doesn't work in cell cultures, right? So this is your in vitro. Then you go into preclinical. And this is your first in vivo, so first animal data, first market conversations, picking your maybe first disease indication. If that works well, that's your IND enabling. So you want to get into the human trials, right? So you want to do an IND enabling study with your kind of, winning, as you are now assuming, clinical program. And then it's early clinical phase 1 and late clinical phase 2 and onwards, right? If you do your homework right, and if you are truly a breakthrough thing, you will be acquired somewhere in early clinical. If you are in a hot space, such as, for example, ADCs, antibody drug conjugates in cancer, you can't be acquired at the IND enabling stage if your data is really good. And that acquisition ticket, as we now see in the market, can be in the vicinity of up to $1 billion or even a bit more, right, for a preclinical company in these hot topics. This is how a normal fund would look at you. So it's a strategy that I've pulled from a 10-year fund. So for early stage opportunities, if the fund is looking at you from an early stage angle, the fund would be looking to join you at preclinical at the valuation of 4 to 10 million. And this is for therapeutics mostly. And then they're going to spend 7 years with you, right? So pick your investors wisely in the very beginning, because it's basically like family formation almost, right? But then as you move at the mid stage, your investors would be looking to spend maybe 5 years with you, getting in at 20 million pre, getting out at 500 million if you're a success case, et cetera, et cetera. What is also very important to understand is that when you talk with your first investors, you should very much be aware of their capital deployment logic. And that is, in our example here in the early stage opportunities, and in our table here in the very bottom of it, in the early stage opportunities, with a hold period of 7 years, your initial ticket in the company would not be exceeding 40% or sometimes even 20% of the full capital that you have reserved for that company. So you very much need to be aware of whether the investor is able to follow on in the next rounds and really support you throughout your journey, and not just be a single cash inflection, right? That relates less to business angels, more to the VC funds. Now, finally, I wanted to throw a couple of examples at you. First one is Robedo Life Sciences. So Robedo is a great example from Stanford. Check them out if you don't know them yet. It's a senescent cell company, one of the first ones that actually was able to take this holistic piece of senescent cell tech and attach it to a specific disease indication, pass the IND enabling it, and now they've just dosed their first patients in the inflammatory skin diseases and the atopic dermatitis specifically, and a bunch of other indications in their clinical trial. So Robedo is basically a staple example of how a holistic longevity technology can be actually boiled down into a specific therapeutic program, and it can be done. It can be done even with the existing FDA framework, and I know people are throwing stones at it, but it can be done. Now, another interesting example is AOA. So AOA is a diagnostic company out of Boston. They were the first ones to figure out how to use blood, actually use gangliosides from cancer cells in blood to diagnose ovarian cancer super early, because ovarian cancer was previously undiagnosable in the blood sample, as opposed to breast cancer and kind of the efforts that Grail did before the acquisition by Illumina. So AOA is another good example for you to check out and their journey. It's very public on the internet. So these are all our kind of early tickets with Fund 1, and I'm happy to share more information about those. Now, very finally, if you're building something in the therapeutic space or something that enables to create drug candidates, you are in for a treat, because we are witnessing historically the largest patent and revenue erosion faced by Big Pharma. In human language, it means that Big Pharma is sitting on a pile of M&A cash, but their 10-year, 20-year revenue targets are completely off mark, because their core money makers are going off patent exclusivity. And by core money makers, I mean even things like Keytruda for Merck, for example. So you're in a good spot. Really, you're in a good spot to be acquired if you're building something unique, because Big Pharma is desperate for a new IP. Finally, if we look at the sizes of the rounds, what you also see is that because of how clinical costs and R&D costs got inflated, investors started to understand that it is much easier to raise and to provide companies with larger initial rounds for companies to essentially be able to get to more meaningful value inflection points and clinical milestones. So you are looking at a possibility to raise a larger round from the very beginning and be more comfortable with the runway and the cash that you have at hand. Now, with that being said, I know we went over time, but hopefully it kind of gives you a very basic understanding of what it means to be building something in the space, and kind of what is the environment you're getting into. Again, it was very hectic, and we only had half an hour. Hopefully it was useful. Please feel free to reach out and look. The longevity field needs more entrepreneurs, right? Needs more founders. And you're very welcome to build the next longevity unicorn in this space. So thank you very much.
Let's give a round of applause. Thank you so much.